Today is the tale of two videos really. One, the subject of a slight reminder, and I don't like to repeat myself, but I think I have to repeat myself a little bit since I last did a video regarding keys and what you need to know about that. And it is quite an important topic because you need to know what you are getting in for if you have problems with these. And firstly, I'm going to mention, well, secondly, but actually I'm going to mention it now, is I am celebrating 10 years since passing my driving test. And the only reason I actually found out is literally this video is going out the day I make it, by the way. And I literally only found out this morning because I had a slight reminder on my phone from Facebook saying, you've got a memory from years ago. And I thought, oh, what's this now? And I was like, I passed my driving test 10 years ago. Can't believe it. Time has absolutely flown by. I remember that day like yesterday. I was bricking it and I didn't even tell my parents. They just thought I was going on a standard driving lesson with my instructor. Little did they know I was going with him to the test centre. I didn't tell them until I came back. I wanted to surprise them. God knows if I'd have failed, that would have been difficult. I would have to have told them about that. But coming back with my test certificate was quite a surprise. And you know what, it's a special thing when you pass your driving test, isn't it? I think everybody remembers that day. Some people, it took a few goes. You know, they say the best drivers pass second time, third time round. I passed first time. I was a bit lucky actually, because there was a point where I think I drove immaculately the whole driving test, and then towards the end of it, kind of pulling out from a roundabout, I kind of almost cut in front of somebody coming from the right, but because I actually went quite steadily and quite, not fast, but I got off the mark, there was a decent amount of space between us two cars. So I think it was kind of an advice, it was one of the minors, as they say, and I had about three of them, three minors, that's it. And I think one of them was meeting traffic. I think my judgment was not quite there. Ideally, he could have failed me on that last little bit if he'd have been a bit more stricter. But I think based on the rest of the test, it was pretty good. And back then, I think the driving test was slightly easier to pass. I think these days now, hazard perception is critical. Following a sat nav, because we are incapable of actually reading road signs, is also apparently a critical skill. I could moan all day about how the test is just not, it's not relevant. You should be teaching people actually how to drive without a sat nav and actually looking and thinking and reading all the signs, because that skill is being lost. And when people have problems with a sat nav, that's when you get people cutting across 3 lanes of a motorway to the nearest exit at the last second. And you've seen all the YouTube videos and TikTok videos and all that. Anyway, the other significance is this. 3 days after passing my driving test, I went out. I immediately started looking for cars because, you know, I'd planned in the positive mind that I would pass my driving test. As I say, God knows if I hadn't, that would have been a really big downer. But you plan, you prepare for the worst, but plan for the best in this situation. And I did. And I bought this car 3 days later. I mean, the fact it was an automatic, why did I choose an automatic? The truth is, this car really appealed to me. It was literally sold not far away from where I was living with my parents at the time. And it just stood out like a sore thumb. I always kind of liked the Focus. I was very close to buying a Rover, I think it was a Rover 600. And that was actually quite appealing as well in many respects, because that was a manual gearbox, I think it was. And it's quite rare for a 600 to be a manual. But I steadfast on I sort of decided on the automatic, mainly because of the condition of this car. Low mileage, few owners from new, and 63,000 miles at the time, and I've put about 28,000 on the clock in 10 years. You work that out on average. The truth is, I drove this car a lot for the first 5-6 years, and the last few years it's led a very quiet life, just quietly being rebuilt by myself, slightly before I started this YouTube channel. But that's the truth. I bought the car in the condition and I didn't care about the gearbox because I'd had some experience of automatics during my driving lessons. Originally, my plan was to actually learn on an automatic, and the decision to go manual was based on the fact that if I wanted to take a profession up, like if I wanted to be, I don't know, a delivery driver, it would open the door for me in career prospects, in terms of job opportunities. But these days, actually, even being a delivery driver these days, just having that option to actually do some driving jobs, it's all automatic these days, so it doesn't really matter if you do decide to go for an automatic. But that was the original plan, and I kind of discovered that really I shouldn't be limiting myself, and I went for a manual. And the truth is, I have driven manual cars, but in very limited numbers, very limited opportunities, and my manual skills are pretty poor. Which is why I've kind of avoided doing car reviews to a point, unless it's an automatic, because my skills are really that poor. I have lost the touch with manuals a little bit. I think the last time I drove a manual was an ST170 about 6 years ago, when I had it for a month and a half. And I was okay back then, but nowadays I'm solidly automatics. And my channel has kind of gone that way with two automatics. I chose the 45 deliberately because it was an automatic. This one was kind of on the basis of its condition. And I've loved this car the last 10 years. I love the fact that it's an automatic because it's different. It's not a standard manual car, and these are getting like rare as hen's teeth now. They are around, but you need to be very picky. The automatic gearboxes don't really go wrong. They have a few Achilles heels, but nothing massive as long as you change the fluid for the correct fluid. The roller coaster ride that I've been on with this car is ridiculous. So in 3 days' time, I'm celebrating 10 years of owning this magnificent car, and it's further on. I can't wait for the next 10 years and what the next 10 years is going to bring with this car, because it's exciting times. This car has gone from a daily driver in the last 6 months to being now very much a show car, and a car that I can drive selectively on nice summer days. Arguably, I'm waiting for some paint work on that side in the next month, so things are going to be a bit higgledy-piggledy. When that's done, hopefully I can start to drive it a bit more and get a bit more of a balance. But anyway, that's the first subject over of this this little episode. But yeah, a few people have asked me why I choose to drive automatics when I have a manual license. It is a choice, and I'm so glad that I got a manual license, because if I was stuck on an automatic license, I'd have no choice. You are limiting yourself, and that's the advice I've got to a lot of young kids these days. I know that electric cars and modern cars are more automatic than they ever have been, but the skill in learning to drive a manual is unsurpassed. And every time I have driven a manual, the connection you have to the car is something that cannot be compared to. An automatic takes that away. I enjoy automatics in a very lazy and smooth and comfortable and very less stressful environment, but when you get behind a manual, it's just something else, and I've got to do that at some point and get my skills back, because it's really bad and embarrassing. Keys. Now, I have revisited this subject before, okay? It is in fact one of my most popular videos. However, I seem to have had a few people come back to me and say, oh, you're wrong, you got some of this wrong. I'll tell you what, that video is one of the best videos I've ever done, because every single piece of information in that video was 100% correct. I may have made the slight error in a couple of my videos, but that was one of my best. And people seem to agree with that, because it's one of my most viewed, it's one of my most liked, but I think I need to revisit it just to make it absolutely crystal clear in a much shorter episode about what you need to know about Focus Mark 1 keys. Now, if you've got a Focus Mark 1, you will have central locking, as standard, central locking. However, the GEM module, which is located down there by your right-hand foot next to the ECU, that module is programmed differently for different specs. Now, somewhat, the way it goes is the CL models do not have remote central locking. So you've got a blank key like this. Now this one is an aftermarket one, which was basically, I think the previous owner before me got this made up, which is fantastic because I don't have to get a second one of my own, because some of them don't come with second keys. It's just one key. I'd recommend a second key just for safety's sake. Okay. Now this remote key will simply, it's got no buttons, but you just have to, you know, unlock it and lock it. That's okay, but manually, just as you do it the old-fashioned way. Okay, and that is basically what the CL has. So the GM module in a CL is only programmed for non-remote locking. Very, very basic and simple. Then in the LX, ZTEC, Gear, ST170 examples, you have one of these. I actually got a new badge for this, would you believe it? If you want to know where I can get this badge, I will give you a link in the description for the correct badge. I've been missing that for years. But basically, they fall off, by the way. You need to put Gorilla Glue on this to make sure it stays on. Now, in the other models, you have remote central locking, so you can do it by yourself, okay? And you can open up the tailgate as well, okay? So it is done remotely in your hand. No manual locking and unlocking like on the CL model. So the GM module in all these other specs has remote locking capabilities. Now the only other difference with the GM modules is I suspect the gear models, because the GM module is basically a body control unit, it has a further function of global closing. So the gear models will have global closing where all the windows can open and close at the same time, essentially. But anyway, and focusing on the keys, the key comes in, well, there's 3 components to this key, and I'm just going to separate everything to show you them. Now, what I recommend here, do this in the car, is just to get a flat blade screwdriver. Unfortunately, I forgot the screwdriver, so I'm having to use the key, but just push in and you can just layer the 2 parts away. There we go. Now what happens here is the key blade comes off. Now that is the first part of this, okay, the key blade. Now this key blade basically is just the key for opening the door locks and the tailgate lock and the ignition barrel. And if I just demonstrate here, so I'm doing this one-handed here, but if I just put this in and, oh look, we can operate the ignition, but oh dear, it won't work. Why won't it work? Oh yes, because the immobilizer is stuck on. That is why you have an immobilizer chip, but it's not part of the key. Okay, so we'll just put that key blade up there. What we have here in the other side is everything that happens with the central locking. So the electronic module on this side. Now this fob, remote fob, is split into 2 parts. Okay, now I'm just going to open this up very gently. Now these tabs, I'm just going to bend these tabs back, okay, and just do this very gently on camera. In fact, I'm going to do this off camera, but what you do is you just bend those tabs gently. Okay, I'll cut back. Right, bend them that way and just pull apart. Now this is the electronic side, and it is a very high quality Siemens system. Oh, homologation, C owner's manual, Siemens 433. That's the millihertz that is actually used, or unless it's 315. Not quite sure why that is, but basically this whole circuit board is actually held onto this side using this little plastic shield, and I think you just have to break that popper if you want to remove the circuit board. That is if you've got problems with the buttons. So if the buttons have got holes in or they're not responding as well, they can wear, but then they're okay, they're high quality items. It's a genuine one, this is. But if this circuit board ever fails, then you're going to need a complete replacement circuit board. Now you can get these aftermarket or genuine. Okay, now what you'd need to do is program that to the central locking, and it's a simple procedure where you put the key in, put the key in, turn it on and off a few times, press any button, and it syncs that fob to the GEM module. That's what you're doing. You're syncing that fob, that circuit board, to the GM module, and then you can use that fob to control the central locking. So it will work to open, close the doors and close the tailgate. That's all it does. Okay. And obviously on the other side, we've got the battery that obviously that requires in order to work. Okay. Now I'm just going to pop these two sides back together again. Again, it's a removable battery. It is a 2032 battery, and I've used Energizer. Use a quality battery, guys. Don't use a cheap one. Okay, so just, yeah, don't do that when you're inside. Don't double deadlock when you're inside. That's another feature, double deadlocking. It was only really a feature and any other model above a CL. On the CL, you couldn't do it, but on all the other models, you could actually theoretically click it twice. I can't get out now. That is double deadlocking. It's a very good feature, but don't do it when someone is inside the car, especially with the windows shut, because you could trap somebody in if this was to malfunction. Now, the other important part is this immobilizer chip. It's just held in here. It's an RFID chip or something very similar. I think I got the letters wrong there, but it's held in with this sort of rubber grommet. Now, that chip is crucial. It is what turns the immobilizer off. Now, in the ignition barrel, by the barrel, there is a transponder ring. This sends a 4-digit code to that transponder ring to turn off the immobilizer to start the car. Without that chip, you're stuffed. Okay. Now, it's done it again. I did not press anything there. Thank you very much. See, central locking problems and all that. Mine has a mind of its own sometimes. But basically, this needs to be very close to that transponder in order to basically start the car. I've seen it. I don't know why people do this, but I've seen it where people take these chips out very, very carefully. If you damage that chip, you are in so much trouble. It's untrue. That's why I'm leaving it well alone where it is. But if you take that chip out very carefully and you sellotape or gaffer tape it to the underside right by the ignition barrel, theoretically your car will be permanently deimmobilized. It will be deimmobilized completely. Every time you can just put that blade in. All you have to do is put this little chip next to the barrel, put that blade in, and it will start the car. I don't know why people do that, to be honest with you. I really don't, because it's basically asking for your car to be stolen with just the key. So I've seen that a few times, and I don't know why people do it, to be honest with you. Maybe the fob's broken and they can't be bothered to get a new fob, so they took the chip out, sellotaped it, and just used the key to start the car. I mean, that's the only reason why I think you would do this. What I can do is put the key blade in. Right, ignition on. Now, that immobilizer is going off all over the place because it senses the ignition is on, but the immobilizer is stuck on, and that's telling me it needs it on. Now, I'm just going to put this very close. Now, it's still stuck on, but I suspect that if I actually try and start the car, this is going to take two hands, by the way, so just bear with. Right, now, today's like this, where I'd actually wanted to bring my tripod, but I forgot it. So I'm going to do it the usual way. Now, key blade in, turn the ignition on. Okay. Oh dear me, we can't sense a chip, and the immobilizer is stuck on. So if I try and start it, nothing. Okay. Now, remove this chip very closely. So I'm going to put this chip very close. I'm not going to put it in the key blade. I'm just going to move it very close, and I'm going to see if it will start. No, it's not having any of it. It has to be incredibly close. Nope. Start again. I'm just going to put it down by the side. It's not having any of it this time. See what I mean? It has to be almost on. I can't do this with two hands, but if I stick it there and attempt to start the car one-handed, I need a camera assistant. No, it won't start. So, no. Right, what I'm going to do is pop this in. I'm just going to pop it in loosely, okay? Straight away, it's gone off. There you go. It doesn't have to be in the key blade for this to work. It just has to be extremely close to that transponder. Because remember, that transponder ring is just here on this other side of the barrel. And that chip has to be really close. As you've just seen, it can't be like too far away at all. So really, honestly, guys, you can have separate parts. You've got the separate parts of the key. And this is the next thing I'm going to say. If you've got problems with that transponder chip, you can get another chip, and all they'll do is they'll program a new chip into an old key blade, an old key or new one, and they'll basically configure it to this transponder ring so that they both link up, okay? And that's as far as that goes. Now, when you get a new key made, there's a few real options that you've got, to be honest with you, and that is, do you want... And this is the question that anyone from a key shop is going to ask you, particularly of a car this age. Do you want just a blank key with a new key blade and a chip to start the car? Or do you just want a blank key with a key fob that just opens doors but can't start the car and can't open it remotely? I doubt that, because you're going to want functionality. Or do you want one of these where you can remotely open the doors, start the car, and have all functionalities? Some people just want a new key blade. You know, you can just, you know, if the key's worn, you can just get the key blade changed and stick it on the old fob. You know, it's as simple as that. Now, this one, I didn't think when I bought the car that this was going to have a chip in it, but it turns out it does. This has got a chip inside it that works. So somebody thought, do you know what? I don't want another remote key. I just want a blank key with a cut key and a chip to start the car. And that's kind of what you want. If you've got a remote key and you just want an emergency spare, don't bother about the remote stuff. Just have a blank key with a new blade and a chip that is programmed to the car. It's probably about 125 to 150 pounds if you want a remote key cut and programmed to the central locking and the immobilizer chip programmed to transponder. So that's the two things you've got to do if you want a remote key. You've got to program this to the central locking, which is this bit, okay? You can do that yourself. But if you want a transponder chip programming to the transponder by the actual ignition barrel, you're going to have to get a professional to do that. That is not something I can do unless you have the actual equipment to do so. So I hope that makes it perfectly clear here that if you want a new blade cutting, just cut the new blade and stick it on a new fob. If you want a new circuit board, buy a new circuit board and just sync it up like I showed you in that previous episode. If your immobilizer chip is malfunctioning, if it's been damaged, then you need a new chip done by a specialist, okay, with the proper equipment and proper key specialist who will program a new chip to that transponder ring there. And I've just dropped that on the floor there. So really, honestly, guys, that is all you need to know. It's very simple, and that's it. Right, as I'm editing, there's something I've forgotten here that I just need to nip into this video. The chip, the transponder ring, and the ECU are all linked together, okay? So if you've got a chip problem, you can't go around it by just getting another fob with a chip and a transponder off another car and just hooking it up to your current car and then trying to start the car, because that transponder is not linked to the ECU, your current ECU. You need it as a kit. It's very popular, these to have seen down the years, a kit. So the fob with presumably a key, it doesn't really matter as long as you've got the fob with the chip, the transponder ring and an ECU. They are all sold together as basically key kits. But really, honestly, you don't need the key blade and you don't need the central locking module part of the actual fob. You just need the chip, the transponder and the ECU. But truth be told, these days, just get somebody out. These kits are actually quite expensive. When people put them together, they're kind of on eBay for about 100 to 150. That's the kind of price that it will cost to have somebody make a completely new remote fob key, new blade cut, and the chip program to your current transponder. So you're not fiddling about by trying to get the ECU out and then get the transponder ring out. It's an absolute faff. So don't really think about that. People have done that before. I don't understand it. So remember, there is no point in just swapping a chip and a transponder onto your current car, because they need programming to the ECU. So you'll need somebody who can come in with a laptop who can program the transponder to the ECU. Yes, the chip and the transponder ring may be linked together because they've come off the same car, but they need to be programmed. That transponder ring needs to be programmed to the ECU. So you're complicating things there a little bit. So just keep it simple. Anyway, take care. And on that note, I am going to get this car back in the garage, and I will see you in another episode. And there are quite a few episodes coming up, and I cannot wait for some of the shows that are coming up with this car, and I cannot wait to meet some of you guys. But in the meantime, see you in a bit.